Hi, I'm Royce Rosewood, and I run solo role-playing games here on the Science Fantasy Awesome channel under the banner Gone Solo. And I recently got a question in the comments that I thought I would try to answer. So here we go. This is from Asim Dean, I assume is how it's called. Would you consider doing a how to play Genesis solo with Mythic, or general how to play video that would help a brand new player learn how to do this? My main desire from such a video would be a ground-up approach for how to combine Genesis with other solo tools like Mythic, Adventure Crafters, Game Master's Apprentice, Table Fables, etc. I've watched hours of videos about such solo tools and the Genesis system, but I feel like there's a big missing piece, which is just, here's how you sit down and get started, step by step. Okay, let's see if I can help. The first thing that I'm going to say is it doesn't matter what tools that you're using. It says you want to play Genesis with Mythic and you've got some other tables picked out. What I'm going to be describing will apply to anybody. Anybody who's going to approach solo in this way. Now, of course, there are other ways to solo. There are other systems that are self-contained or like journaling games, but we're talking about using a role-playing game with an emulator and getting started with that. With that in mind, let's talk about step-by-step how you will get started and talk about each of these tools and what they do. I think if we explain what each of these tools do and the kinds of ways in which you use them, I think that will help you move forward and get started. Step one is pick your tools. This commenter has already done that, but maybe you are starting from nothing. Here are the kinds of tools that you will need to get started. So first of all, you're going to need a system. Now, the commenter has picked Genesis. You could be using D&D 5e, Savage Worlds, Troika, any sort of D20 system, whatever. It's a set of rules that describes characters and the kinds of things that characters can do and how you determine whether they succeed or fail at those things. There are any number of ways to do this, and you can do this with any system, really. Then you need a Game Master emulator. Now, this commenter has very wisely picked Mythic, which would be also my recommendation. What Mythic is going to do is help you be your own Game Master. Right? You're going to be playing the role-playing game, and normally you would need a game master to help you decide and adjudicate and describe situations and describe characters and all the things that you need to do that you're going to be interacting with in the world. Mythic is going to help you do that for yourself. You can use it to ask yes or no questions, and it's also going to be keeping track of story threads and characters and spit them back out at you in interesting and surprising ways that makes the campaign feel cohesive in the same way that a game master would be pulling things together and presenting them to the players. Now, this next part is optional, but the commenter has picked out some tables and some oracles to help assist with play. Now, these are great if you know when and how to use them. Tables and oracles are for when you need an idea or when you want to introduce an element of surprise, or you just don't want to make a decision. And depending on the answers that they give, the kinds of answers will determine when you ask them. If it generates characters, or if it generates locations, or if it generates plot hooks, or if it just generates words that you then interpret, right? So like Mythic has a number of oracles that do this, the action table and all the descriptor tables, etc. You use those and then interpret them to jumpstart your imagination and give you an idea so that you can keep moving forward. Now, there are a number of ways to do this. So I've used Mythic and the Mythic tables here, which are great. I've used story cubes, which are more visual. I've used cards like tarot cards or illustrated oracle cards. It doesn't matter what they are as long as you know when you would use them and the kinds of questions that you would ask them. The other thing that you might need or you might think about is tables that are specific for the setting that you want to play. These might be made available. They might be part of the setting resource book. And if not, you could make them pretty easily. If you are in a world where there's lots of different species and you're encountering, characters, you could come up with a little table that lists all the species. And then every time you encounter a character, you could roll on that table and it would tell you what kind of species they are, or, what kind of job they have. You can do the same thing with locations. If you've got a setting book that gives you all sorts of different kinds of locations, you could make a table for that. And then finally, the last kind of tool that you might need is to decide how you are going to do your record keeping. Are you going to take notes? Are you going to write a journal? Are you going to write a blog? Are you going to do like an audio? Are you going to take audio notes? Are you going to do like me and do videos? You've got all your tools picked out, and you want to get started. Well, okay, here we go. Let's get started. First thing you need to do, so step 2, after picking out your tools, step 2 is make a character. So if you already have an idea of a character that you think sounds really fun to play and can do the kinds of things like, oh, I want to be able to do this. Okay, make that character. Follow the rules that the system provides and make that character. If it provides methods for random generation and you just want to play any random character, you could do that too. But probably you have an idea in your head of the kind of experience that you want to have and the kind of character that you want to play and the kinds of things you want to do. And so make a character to do those things. Step 3 is optional and really kind of dependent on the emulator you're using, but we're talking about Mythic. Okay, so you need to seed the thread tables and the character tables. Now, this isn't strictly necessary, but I think it would be helpful. You're certainly welcome to discover all the threads and discover all the characters in play, but I find that giving just a little bit of starting things helps Mythic start to run a little bit. So in terms of threads, think about, based on what you know about this character, what kind of things might they want to do? What might be going on in the world around them that might be causing trouble for them or for other characters? If you don't have any ideas, that's when you can start using your tools, right? If you have a tool that generates plot hooks, or a tool that, you could go to Mythic and ask the action table and then interpret that in a way of like, okay, what do these words mean? And what does that tell me about what my character wants or what's going on in the world? Maybe come up with like 2 or 3. Same thing with characters, right? So based on what you know about this character, who do they know? What are their bonds and connections to this world? Are there family members? Are there lovers or romantic interests? Do they have friends, based on their job? Like, who are they connected to at their job? Like, what factions might be a part of, or connected to? What rivals might they have? What enemies might they have? And then same thing with rival organizations, organizations that are causing them trouble or that they're going to come into conflict, right? Come up with like maybe 2 or 3, or you can either, go ahead and roll up some specifics about those characters, or you could just leave them generic. Like I've done it before where I just wrote like family member, and when it came up, then I would roll and get more information about who this person is. Maybe you saw in the Keyforge campaign, I put down local contact, and when it came up, I didn't know anything about this character, so that's when I used the tables to generate the idea of this character, came up with some ideas, and then we moved forward from there. Great. So it's helpful to do this with Mythic because you might get a random event right away. And so it's nice to have a couple things on there in case it spits something out at you immediately. You've got your character. You've got your setup. And now you have everything you need to start. So what you want to do is you want to put your character in a situation. And I recommend putting them in trouble right away, or putting them in a situation where we're seeing the kinds of things that they're doing already. In the Keyforge campaign, right, we had Fabum. She was in the middle of, negotiating this situation. And so she was already in the midst of something, and that was showing us who she was as a negotiator, as an arbitrator, and taking care of this thing. In the Troika campaign, right, I already had like this idea of a quest giver. And so I had my characters and they were given the quest, and we started off, and so I generated that thing and we went off. Put your character in a situation based on what you know about them, based on what you know about the world. Get them into a situation that you're not quite sure how they're going to get out of. Okay. Now, especially for this first scene, you might be looking to your oracles and tables a lot because there's a lot that you don't know. Who else is here? Generating those characters, generating the situations. You've got that situation, and now you're going to be moving through the scene. And depending on the kinds of questions you have, you're going to turn to any of your various tools. Right? So remember, you're in control of your player character. You can make the character do or say anything, just as if you were role-playing at a table. Now, when your character comes up against something where you're not sure if they should succeed or fail, that's when you turn to the system. That's when you roll the dice, or whatever method it is, to determine, based on your character's stats or however your system works, whether your character succeeds or fails. Now, in this situation, you have to be a little bit of a player and a little bit of a game master, right? Because you might have to set a difficulty rating. You might have to consider advantages or disadvantages. And you kind of have to wear both hats, right? You, the player, want to do this, and then you, the game master, have to decide based on your opinion. And your opinion is the only thing that matters because it's your game. You get to play it however you want. How you're going to decide whether the character succeeds or fails at that thing. You don't have to test for everything. If there's something that you feel like there's no danger, or there's no challenge, or there's no consequence to failure, you can just have your character succeed. If it's just something that a person can do, just have them do it. That's fine. But if there's challenge, or if there's consequence to failure, then you need to know whether this character has succeeded or failed. So that's the kind of thing that you would go to the system for. If you need to know something about the world or a character, that's where you might turn to your tables and your oracles, right? We've talked about generating characters, generating locations, right? You've got those tools all ready to go. Now, if we need additional information, if we're using Mythic, that's when we start to ask the fate chart. We can ask yes or no questions to the fate chart. So we say, for example, we generate a swamp. We need to know, well, is this swamp inhabited? Well, I don't know. What do we think that's likely or unlikely, right? And we roll those dice. The great thing about Mythic and the great thing about the fate chart is either our expectations will be met and we move forward. We say, okay, things are as we expected. We got a yes, we move forward. Or we get surprised, right? Oh, I got the answer that I wasn't expecting. Interesting. So what does that mean? And then we, follow those threads. And then you just keep doing that. You get information from your oracles. You decide what your characters do. You decide whether they succeed or fail. You get more information, and you just keep going back and forth. And I know that sounds really general, but that's really all there is to it. There's a lot of different approaches and a lot of different ways that you could go about this, but that's sort of the general overview. And the rest is sort of up to style and the kinds of things that you like to do. If you're really interested in tactical combat, right, you're going to gear things towards situations where you're generating enemies with really specific stats in a really specific environment, and doing that thing. If you're interested in more like role play, right, like I am, you're generating characters and you're generating motivations, and you're sort of seeing how all these things interact. Great. And so at a certain point, you'll feel things have come to a natural end, and you'll decide, okay, usually it's like if we're going to be moving on to a different location, or you just feel like things are completed, that's the end of that scene. All right. And then based on what we know, okay, what do we change? What's learned? Do we need to update our thread tables? Do we need to update our character tables? And then we go in and then we say, okay, what would happen next? And this is the final step. We just keep repeating this. We say, based on my assumptions, what do I think would happen next? What would I have my character go and do? There you go. So hopefully that helps. Talking about the different tools and what we use them for. We use the system for succeed or fail and the kinds of things that our characters can do. We use our Game Master emulator for sort of larger questions, yes or no, about the world. And then we use our tables for generating ideas and helping inspire us. There's all that. Hopefully that helps. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'll be happy to address them as best I can. Let me know any other questions that you have. If you're new to the channel, please check out my other series where you see all of this in action. So thanks so much. Please like, subscribe, and share. And hopefully we'll see you around the channel. Thanks so much.